us and watching us online. I know that a lot of people have signed up for our live stream today. Apart from speaker series events, our company organizes executive programs on disruptive technology and emerging trends and conferences. And our next conference is coming up on July 30th, and it's called Robotics as a Business. And if you're interested, can you hear me? If you're interested, feel free to check out our website, and you can register through our Eventbrite page. And I believe our speaker is on his way. I just saw him here a couple of minutes ago. So once he arrives, we'll be ready to start. Please don't leave, those who are watching online. Pleasure. I would like to introduce our wonderful guest speaker, Greg Nudelman, who is CEO of Design Caffeine and Fortune 500 advisor, and also user experience strategist. And just a couple of words about Greg. He's worked with such companies as Intuit, Oracle, Cisco, Safeway, Groupon, and recently helped Intuit get 6 of their apps featured in their Android Play Store and Apple App Store. He's also internationally acclaimed design workshop leader and has co-authored 4 books on UX. So it's great having you here, Greg, and giving it to you.
Thank you, Marina. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, all right. Is it coming? Okay, let's try a little closer. Oh, okay, is that better? All right. Excellent. Well, thank you for coming and welcome. This is kind of a rainy afternoon for us here in the summer. They say it never rains in California, but I guess it does a bit once in a while. So thank you all. $1 per tip? Uh-huh. Yeah, sure. You hand professional's touch here. let's try this one. I'll put it in pocket. How about now? Oh, okay. Oh, beautiful. All right, that's even better. Yeah, I like it. All right. So, also in the spirit of lean and agile, we're going to make it interactive. There are 4 parts to the talk. So I want you guys to think about good questions to ask throughout. And so I'm going to pause periodically and take some questions, and then we're going to continue on with the next part. Does that sound like a good plan for everybody? All right. I know you're all probably tired, but there's coffee right there in the corner, and it's good. So design caffeine, gotta have the coffee. All right. So if you put away your phones, you can take them out if you like. You can tweet. This is the hashtag you can use to join the conversation that's happening 24/7 about this exciting topic. And please do tweet if you do. Make me look like I lost 20 pounds. That's for extra bonus. Then I'll retweet that. So to kind of go back to the roots of this, how did this all come about? Well, when I first started doing mobile design, which was about 7 or 8 years ago, this is what I've done. I would take my Moleskine notebook and I would draw pictures like this. Anybody has a Moleskine? Yeah. All right. Great. Yeah. So I felt really designery doing this. I was like, drawing little arrows and transitions here and so forth. It felt wonderful. And then one of these days I was doing some work at a client, and I left my precious Moleskine behind. And what to do, right? I need to draw something. I'm a visual thinker. So what did I do? I pulled out a sticky note pack, the first thing that I saw on the desk, which was about that size. And I didn't have a lot of time, so I just drew the most essential part, which is just the controls, the buttons, and parts of the interface that were pertinent to the task. I didn't draw the box around it, no buttons, I didn't make it look like a phone. But despite that, the CEO, who's a very reserved person, just grabbed it like this and started saying, well, this is exactly what I mean, and started tapping these buttons. And that was eureka moment, that you can take an $800 computer, the pinnacle of the 21st century technology, this wonderful, amazing space-age phone that we have, and then model it with a pack of sticky notes for less than $1. All it took is a little bit of an active imagination and engagement at that level, because it's still a physical object. And in fact, dimensions are just about perfect. And I don't know if you've seen these fancy sticky notes that people have, and you can buy them online. You don't need to do that. There's no reason for it. I'm going to tell you right now, this works just fine. And we've done a ton of workshops on this. We've done several graduate courses. It just works. So this is a great methodology that you're about to see today. Hopefully you can apply it in your own life. Now, as I've been doing these workshops and all this work with the clients, I kept asking myself, what's the best way to design mobile interfaces? And so over 7 years of doing this, I put it together in this book, $1 Prototype. And what you're going to get today is kind of an overview of really important pieces, parts that are really, really key about this methodology. So you can put it to work tomorrow morning if that's what you want. So that's what I'm excited about. So first thing, can we improve collaboration in the Agile process? You have to start with the process, because you got to work with other people. You got to design maybe a great idea, but somehow somebody has to actually implement this stuff. Who's seen this diagram before? Anybody seen it? Okay, great. So this is Agile Scrum, right? And most of us seen it, and it's pretty good, right? But the issue is that it's optimized for software development and not for UX. It's not optimized for innovation or customer delight. It is optimized for efficiency. And there's a big difference between efficiency and effectiveness. Effectiveness is doing the right thing. Efficiency is doing the right thing really, really fast and well. So this is a great model for software development. Not so great, turns out, for user experience and innovation. So how do we improve that? Well, you have to really ask yourself, what is an Agile team consist of? Well, a typical Agile team, you have a business person, then you have a designer, and you have a developer. And off you go. This is kind of a story of pre-agile. This is what happens when you make a transition to agile. And you all kind of work together maybe in the waterfall model, and it's all, beautiful rainbows and waterfalls, and you got a business person writing a few lines of requirements, and they turn it over to the developer, to the designer, who does some wireframes, and there's a slightly bigger stack, right? And then the developer creates this beautiful application. In this case, it's an awesome game of tic-tac-toe. But this stuff sort of flows downhill in the waterfall model, and it's all, rainbows and pink unicorns. And I can't draw a pink unicorn to save my life, so I pulled an Antoine de Saint-Exupéry and I drew a box, and you can imagine the pink unicorns inside. The holes are so they don't suffocate. Right? Yeah, perfect. All right. So then, this happens. Your agile guru like Fred Brooks, Robert Martin, Ken Schwaber, take a pick. They say, "Thou shall be agile." It's almost like a biblical moment. It's it's like St. Paul, traveling on the road to Damascus. Kapow! Like, wow, it used to take 6 months just to do research and design, then it took 1 year to do the coding. Thank goodness. Thank goodness we're now an agile shop, because we can have the whole thing ready in just 2 weeks. Right? It's going to be so easy. And so the developers are slightly concerned by this development, right? And then the designers are also somewhat apprehensive, because they know that no matter how fast they run, they cannot get ahead of an agile beast, because they keep producing wireframes and the stuff keeps changing. They can never get ahead of this Cthulhu monster. So this is the real deal. J.P. Hoover Lovecraft fans? Anybody? Anybody? Yes, a couple of people. Yes, it's okay. You can raise your arm. All right. The good news, there's a better way. And it's just 2 tricks, really. Trick number 1 is you replace a kickoff meeting with a design workshop. And trick number 2 is you replace your typical usability testing with testing with sticky notes. And I'll explain exactly what that means. So this is a typical kickoff meeting. Anybody been to one of these? A couple of people. Okay, where do the rest of you been? Somewhere? All right. Too late in the day for that. She is basically sitting around and staring at her computer, barely paying attention to this. So this guy is not paying attention at all. He's sitting backwards to the presentation, typing something. This guy wrote exactly 2 lines of notes. They're not particularly well engaged. They have their electronics in front of them. They're sitting far apart from each other, right? They're barely paying attention to this thing. This is a typical meeting. This is really what happens. And if you look at it from our little sticky note storyboard here, you got the pointy-haired boss, presenting the future, and then these guys aren't really that happy about it. They got the computer in front of them, and then he goes, "How about estimates? Let's hear your estimates. This is going to be great. Going to have a great application here." And at this point, your designer is dizzy, because he doesn't know what the heck you're talking about. It's just a bunch of PowerPoint slides, right? And the developer has steam coming out of her ears, and this is steam, not flying broccoli. You have to forgive my poor drawing skills there. But it's really not the most ideal situation, because it's a very kind of pushing out corrupts from within, right? You guys heard of that Tufty stuff? So basically, it's a top-down type of presentation. It's not really very engaging. We still haven't seen the vision. We just know a couple of points on the PowerPoint slides. We don't know what you're really trying to build. So compare this with the design workshop. Now, still the same people are present, but notice the dynamic is completely different. You're all sitting around the same table. There are no electronics. You're instead working together to come up with a vision of what this thing actually would look like. And it need not take long. When we do this in workshops, when we do this in the class, it really takes 15 to 30 minutes. It need not take a long time to do this. But the dynamic is completely different, because you are working together, and instead of producing a list of requirements, application should do this, should do that, you produce a storyboard that tells you what this product is actually about. And it contains a vision of what that is and some key use cases. So a vision storyboard. Let me give you an example of this. This is a case study from my SF State University course for an app called Be a Hero. And so this lady is in the kitchen. Notice a lot of drama happens in the kitchen. You know, when you have an opening shot and it's a kitchen, you almost can bet it's going to be a drama. So this is truly a drama. She's listening to the radio, and it says, breaking news from San Francisco, Crown 4. A typhoon has devastated the Philippines, and people are in dire need of help. She says, this is terrible, how I can help. She pulls out her trusty phone, says, I'm going to donate $200. That's going to go straight to the right place. And so the relief agencies are using the funds, and supplies are dropped from the helicopter, and the refugees are being helped and ready to rebuild their lives. She feels like a hero, and these people's lives are obviously very directly improved as a result of this application. Now, using the storyboard, you can see a typical, really crystal clear use case here, right? And it's very, very easy to understand what this app is going to be doing and what the primary use case is. I'm sure there are other use cases that are involved in the app. In fact, that's what they've discovered. But that is really the primary one. Notice how much more engaging this is than a bunch of requirements. So then using this storyboard, using this vision, you can implement this using sticky notes. Now, the reason why sticky notes work is because our mobile applications are really fairly capable, but at the same time, they're very simple. They have to be, because we use our fat fingers to manipulate the buttons. So there's not a lot we can do as far as pointing at this thing, right? So this thing, by default, is fairly simple. So this actually works surprisingly well. And this is what their wireframes would look like when they did the project. Now remember, this entire project end-to-end was about 13 weeks. So this is the opening shot. You can see this is the home page right here. This is the kind of stuff that's happening around the world. Then you got this kind of donate the money, different functions you can do with it. Then this whole donate sequence, and then a thank you list. And then when they got this to where they wanted it, they kept us at this level for basically almost the entire 13 weeks. And they went through several iterations, which I'll show you in a few minutes. But the key part of it is you can get, in this low fidelity, a lot of stuff. You can get transitions, you can get information architecture, you can get entire copy, you can get all the icons. You can pretty much solve 90%, 95% of your application while staying in this sticky note format. And the good news about this, and I'll talk about this in a minute again, is that your customers that you talk to appreciate this, because they can see this as hand-drawn, and they're able to engage at a completely different level and say, yes, I can give you feedback that is very deep and not just about the colors or some little thing like that, but actually very, very deep level feedback, and it's very, very useful for you, both in terms of marketing your application and in terms of building your application from the ground up. So once you got this pretty much resolved in the way you want it, you can then skin this. But you don't need to go to this level until you're pretty sure that you got the right thing already designed and tested. Does that make sense? Perfect. Okay. So, what do you give to the developers? That's the question that I'm always asked. So I'm going to answer it ahead of time. What do you give to the developers while you figure all this out? That's a fair question. And this is what you do. You figure out complex development tasks that you still have to do, regardless of what the UI looks like, and you set them loose. For example, to give you an example, if you have a Android application, you're going to need to have a whole stack of Android set up. You're going to need a development environment, you're going to need a database, you're going to need all of that stuff running. You're going to need an emulator. That takes time. So that's a perfect kind of dev activity that you can do. One of my early projects required a translation of a zip code to a GPS coordinates, which was at the time was not available. That's a perfect example where we knew that was going to be required based on what? Our storyboard. So we looked at our storyboard, we said, if they're typing in a zip code, they're going to need to have a zip code in there at some point, and we're going to need to translate it to GPS to find out where they are in the world so we can locate other people next to them. So that was a perfectly defined piece of back-end stuff that you needed to do. So we handed that over to them, and we said, go for it. You need to figure that out. That's going to need to be working. So that's your sprint one. While you're doing this, we're going to then create our sticky note wireframes, and we're going to go out there and test it. And we're going to figure out what the heck we're actually designing, and is this even the right thing? Does that make sense? As this is a critical piece. So you create space, right? You create the slack. Anybody read this book called Scarcity? Excellent book. I highly recommend it. I think it should be like required reading for anyone doing digital products. They talk about the concept of slack. It's very, very important to have that slack as a designer or as a CEO, of somebody who's responsible for design one way or the other. You need to have that slack to then go out there and test this stuff. You can't be constantly in the business of producing deliverables. You have to have the slack to think about design. And that's what this methodology really gives you. That's the number one kind of takeaway here. So the whole activity is about phase matching UX design with the code developers so the two can co-create and not constantly running into each other. So by the way, that little icon is what I say. You can kind of tweet this if that's what you want to do, by all means. If not, that's okay too. But these are kind of little tweetable segments if that's what you want to do. No pressure. No pressure. So then at this point, any questions about the agile process aspect of this?
Oh, I'm sorry. You send off the developers to go do something. How many times do they have to go redo it because it didn't exactly match your vision?
Great question. This methodology actually allows you to go fairly quickly. So by the time a couple of weeks comes around, you're going to have a fairly complete design done. Not all the way done, but most of it is going to be done, and you're going to know where kind of the dragons are buried, where friction points are, where things are going to be still tweaked, and you're going to know things that are already working. And if you follow my suggestions, you will take a couple of developers with you, at least on one of your little excursions for testing. So they're going to know that too. And they're going to see what's going on very, very intimately. They're going to be familiar with the design. You're still leading the design as a designer or as a CEO, as a chief marketing officer, chief product engineer, whatever your title happens to be. Green eggs and ham, whatever. But bottom line is you're going to have enough of an understanding, and you're going to be able to push that into your team so they know that too. So they're not going to code the stuff that is a little bit tweaky. It's still not quite gelled, number one. Number two, they're not going to spend as much time on it. They're just going to throw something together if you're still iterating on this. But you are going to have a pretty decent idea for that particular sprint. In fact, about half the time you spend supporting the current sprint, and the other half the time you spend working on the next sprint and figuring that out. So that's kind of how it breakdown happens. You should still attend all the morning stand-up meetings and so forth, because you're gonna be able to field these questions. You're gonna be the best person to do that. But as far as the redo, this method actually seems to be the most effective in minimizing the redo, because you can put this in front of customers, kind of get it from the horse's mouth, and then see that most important question of all: is this even worth building to begin with? That is the most important question, and that's probably the number one way that the startups fail, and you will be able to answer that using this method in the most effective way. So that's a great question. Please.
Usually I found that we have remote teams, and so it's kind of hard to do that sort of design with remote teams to try to get ahead. So that's one question. How do you handle that? And then the second one is that I have usually found in the agile process, I'm a UX designer, is that we're almost parallel. I'm parallel with development as opposed to being ahead.
Right.
And it becomes a very difficult process as new requirements come in to even do any type of user validation. So
You're-
that becomes extremely
yeah,
difficult.
the agile guppy is getting you, right? Yeah, the Cthulhu monster. Yeah, exactly. I think that's she just exactly spoke to the reason why we were forced to kind of work through this. It's the necessity is the mother of invention, if you will. So that's a really great point. Now, using lightweight methodology and concentrating on what we're going to talk about next, which is the minimum viable prototype, not the minimum viable product, but the minimum viable prototype, is going to help you get ahead of the curve. And having that vision that you work with together with the bosses is also going to be able to have that clarity and continuity. And you're going to go, wait, in our vision, what we said next, we're going to be working on this. So you're going to have the whole thing kind of in front of you. You're going to have that visibility. You also, the nice thing about these sticky notes is every sticky note you design is also immediately the prototype. So there's no overhead that is required to then take the sticky note and turn it into a prototype of any kind. You can immediately take it into testing. So as soon as you have 3 screens designed, you can go and start interviewing customers, start testing this. You don't have to wait for any permission, any sort of magical thing. In fact, that's where the mobile is. Most of the mobile is used kind of on the move, right? So you're forced to get out of the office. If you follow my suggestions, you basically take the stuff and you go out and you test it where people actually use your app. And you don't sit around and have these 3-hour shouting matches. Instead, you say, oh, you think the button should be here. Great. Let me sketch that. Now we have two designs. Now we're going to go and test it. And the whole thing takes maybe 20 minutes, right? So we'll talk about the testing as well. And your first question I completely blanked out on. The remote, yes, dealing with remote teams. Now, that's a whole other, it's a little beyond the scope, but I'll touch on this. It's in the book, though. First of all, it's very easy to, once you have the sticky notes, just take a photo. In fact, take lots of photos so you can see the progression of your stuff. But take a photo, send it over to them. Just even if you got a few wireframes. In fact, it helps prepare them for this. Because most people, when they think UX, they're expecting the pretty stuff, right? They're expecting the finished wireframe. And you can tell them the truth. You can tell them, look, that's coming. But what we're trying to do today is we're trying to move a little faster so you guys are not waiting for me to finish. You can already have the wireframes, and the way you would have them is they're going to be sketched. And you're going to get some pushback from that. There's no doubt about it, because if everything looked perfect and pretty, and they could point at that and go, she didn't put that in, that's why it's not in there, right? That's a whole different dynamic there. So it's a little bit of a give and take, but the more you prepare them ahead of time, the more you engage them starting with the kickoff, starting with that design workshop. You're already preparing them that this is going to be a very different project. This is going to be a little bit more lo-fi, a little bit more dynamic, right? But they're going to get their stuff eventually. So then you get questions like, but I don't understand. I can't read your sticky notes. Is this a button or is this a link? I can't figure this out. So you say, okay, let's sit down together over WebEx and I will sketch it for you. What part don't you understand? And you walk step by step, right? You go, okay, what about this? Let me draw that again. See, this is a button, and when you click it, this happens. Right? But I just don't understand. Well, let me draw it again. So you kind of go through. You gotta change a little bit. It's gonna be a bit of a change, because if they kept getting high definition Photoshop, everything looks perfect from you, they're not gonna get that anymore. Not till the end. They're gonna get hand-drawn wireframes. But that's what gives you that slack, right? Slack to test, which is what you are not able to do right now, and slack to be able to think about the design strategically and try different design directions. Right now, you barely have time to cover just one design direction, much less test it. What I'm saying is now you have no limit on the number of directions you want to try. You want to try 5? Great. In fact, what ends up happening is you try a couple, then you tweak it. So it's a continuous improvement process. It's right. Rapid iterative testing and evaluation. It's truly, yeah, it's the right way to do it. Right, yeah. Pardon my pun. But that's a great question, though. So there's some tricks in the book that's a little beyond this, but that's basically the gist of it, is you have to set the expectations right away, and you have to explain to them. You have to get the management buy-in. You have to say, look, you're going to get a better design, and you're still going to get those pretty wireframes, just not till you guys are ready to actually do the pretty stuff. Because the fidelity of my deliverables is going to match where we are in the project for the first time. If we're still struggling with understanding our information architecture, there's no point in doing it in the Photoshop. If we're still struggling with is this even the right product to make, there's no point to give you any wireframes. The storyboard is what you need at this point to answer is this even the right product? What's the point in having perfect deliverable if this is not the right product? Let's not fall in love with this stuff before you truly have something that's valuable to fall in love with. Does that make sense? Perfect. So great question. All right, so let's move on to the next pieces. The rest of the time we will spend on practical, tactical stuff on how to implement this. So there's 3 more sections, and please keep those questions coming. That was really great. So 3 sections: envision, prototype, and test. This is how you implement this methodology. In the envision section, we're going to cover how to create and test your storyboard, how to start by defining a place, and how to speak naturally and end with appropriate bang. Little tips for, professional tips for storyboarding really effectively. So even if you've never done a storyboard before, this is going to be helpful, and you hopefully going to have enough to go on to where tomorrow morning you can do one. Who has done a storyboard before? A few people. Okay, great. All right, fantastic. So this is going to be probably a review for you guys, but hopefully that's helpful. So the main reason to build a storyboard, a lot of people ask, oh, why bother, right? I already have an app. Why should I have a storyboard? Well, it's because you want to separate the what from the how, because the how you can improvise, but the what, you really have to have that vision in place. What are we trying to do? What is the outcome of this? What is the major use case? Where is this going to be used? All these questions are really, really key, because they're going to determine how you're going to implement this stuff. And we've already seen the storyboard, and this is exactly a great example of this, because it's an end-to-end encapsulated use case. It tells you what it starts with and what the final feeling, what the natural bang is going to be at the end. So again, why bother with the storyboard? Let me give you a little case study. This is from an app called Moodring. So we got some very smart people got together as a group in one of my workshops, and they put this together. They said, this is going to be great. We're going to have an app called a Moodring. And this is what it's going to do. Let's say you're in the house and you're feeling really sad, right? Then you pull out your mood tracker, and look, she's already feeling a little better, right? And says, welcome to Mood Tracker, answer a few questions. I guess this is mood, situation, and then she says, oh, I feel better, right, from interacting with this app. Right, that was a storyboard. Then the other person in this team did a slightly different storyboard. Her thing was a commute. So this is actually cars moving down the freeway. So some of you guys coming down here tonight could probably relate, right? So then this person is, I love this picture. Every time I show it, this is how I start to feel behind the wheel, right? This is where I fire up Eckhart Tolle's The Power of Now and go, just breathe. Okay, so she, even though she's driving, that never happens, right? She pulls out her phone. That never happens, right? But she pulls out her phone and she says, I am, and of course she's this. She's actually at this level. And then something happens in the app, and then something else happens in the app, and then she can upload a photo or make a note. And she's driving, right? So that's why I always say, where are you, right? So, but when they presented these storyboards, much like I'm doing this to you now, is this something you'd even want to do? Or, is this something that's actually going to make you feel better? Is some interaction with the phone going to make you feel better? And the feedback that they got from potential customers, which was the rest of the class, was, well, when I feel sad, I just call up my friends, or I text my girlfriend, or I'll listen to good music, or like me, fire up Eckhart Tolle, right, or something. I don't really need a separate app to do this. So this was the point where they decided to pivot, and for a good reason. So according to Fortune magazine, the number one reason the startups fail, the number one reason, is the lack of demand for the product or service. So by building the storyboard, you can test this very easily. Make sure all your stakeholders agree that this is really what you're building. That if you build this product and at the end the person has this experience with your product, that's going to be what you want it to do at the end. It's really critical. Every single time that I've worked with a client and they insisted not to build a storyboard, we had to go back and do expensive rework. And we work on fixed price, which always bites us in the butt, right? So every single time we had a successful project, we started with a storyboard, we agreed that this is the right vision. Even if you take just 5 minutes, 10 minutes to draw it, it has a certain magic to it that allows you to get into this other frame of mind, because then you're asking the what and not the how. Every time I saw every single team, and I've taught this method now to about 1,000 people. Every single time I had a team that refused to work in the storyboard and just jumped straight into design, they had to go back and rework. Now that's a lot of track record to do this. So yes, you can trust me, or you can kind of do it yourself, but I'm really trying to save you a lot of rework. And I highly, highly recommend you spend just 10 minutes, you draw this, even if you already have an app in place. Highly recommended. Hold that thought.
Okay.
Great question. Okay, I know it's coming. Great question. I can see she's really excited, so it must be a great question. So this team, this is why I want you to hold. This team pivoted. Notice it's the same drawing style, but now a much better storyboard. Again, you start at the house, and there's a great reason to use square stickies, because they could reuse it, right? They reuse the sticky note. You don't need to draw the storyboard from scratch every single time. We use these square sticky notes to separate them. I talk about this at length in the book. To separate them from these, because there's no room to draw. There's no room to draw a full interface on this. Number one. Number two, these can be reused, right? As you saw right now, the opening slide is where you spend a little more time. Where are you? We'll touch on that in a second. But you can reuse it, so you don't have to redraw the whole thing over again. And we keep them hygienically separate, because this is really the what and this is the how. So we don't mix the two. So in your mind, this is a different activity. You pick up a different tool. Anybody does martial arts? Aikido? All right. I'm not going to ask which style, but Aikido is my favorite. Bottom line, you put on a gi, you get a different mindset. It's very important, different mindset. This is a what and this is a how. So don't mix the two, right? Okay. Enough about that part. So please go ahead and ask your question, because I wanted to show them this. Did you guys understand what this is? So she starts at the house. Sorry, hold that thought. The dryer, she's doing the dryer, and then, crap, the dryer's on fire. And she takes a picture of it. She goes to this app called the Homekeeper, dryer repair. This person says, hey, I'm on my way. And Afif, you can probably relate to this storyboard, right? This handyman, the repairman, is on his way to do a dryer repair. There he is, actively at work, repaired the dryer, thank you. So, natural bang, She's thankful the dryer is working. It's not like, oh my God, this is the most awesomest things ever. This is just natural bang. Oh, the dryer's ready. It's not going to catch fire anymore. I can dry my clothes. That's what I mean by natural bang. So, but that's the new storyboard. That's the pivot that they did. And it's a much more usable, much more applicable storyboard. They still struggled with what? Because they had to like describe their stuff and all of that stuff. You can see that in the book. But the vision was crystal clear. And the vision was something you all, I think, can relate to. This is a much more usable use case than the moon ring. Now you can ask.
Now?
Yes. Sorry about that.
No problem. So I was just asking a question. The slide you had a couple slides ago.
Yes, let's go
saying
back
the
to that.
number one reason startups fail.
There it is.
There we go. Is a lack of demand for their product or service, which I totally get, and I get how the storyboards can kind of help that process. I'm interested in hearing some real-world examples of how people use that particular storyboard process and got the feedback. You know, not necessarily like, oh, I'm in a classroom and I just asked people here and then I went back to drawing. But if I'm an actual business, you know, are they photographing these? Are they doing online surveys? Are they just, you know, tapping people on the street as
Yes.
opposed to just asking people in their workplace? You know, how are they honing that down and really figuring out who's the right audience for my demand, and I'm getting these sticky notes in front of them?
Fantastic question. And the answer is there's an app called Square. You guys have seen Square? Right. So I have it as a third person hearsay, but the creator of Square allegedly, there's no proof, had this on basically a piece of paper. It was an idea. So I think it was a she. I think it was a she, but don't quote me. So she drew the concept on a piece of paper. Then she folded the paper up, put it in her pocket, and everywhere she went, she would open it up and go, see, does this make sense to you? Where do you see the problems? And then she honed her concept to where this thing was, you know, figured out that it wasn't the case, because there were a few apps early on that had a case. In fact, I worked with a company that was optimizing the case, and the case was a complete failure, because the problem with it was that everybody had a different phone that they were trying to use. So the reason why Square works so well, it was a plugin that went to a phone jack, and you could use it with any phone you wanted. Back at the time, there was only one model, right, the early iPhone, but at the same time, very quickly, that turned into a complete debacle because there were so many other phones. As soon as Android hit the market, there were so many other phones. So it made it critical to have that storyboard and to walk around and to ask that. But again, don't quote me on this. I have it as a hearsay. Now, what I do know for a fact is that Kevin Chang, who you'll see his work a little bit later, and he has a wonderful book out at Rosenfeld Media. I'm going to give it a shout out called "I See What I Mean," explaining things with comics, or UX design with comics, something like that. But "See What I Mean" is the title. So he talks at length about using comics and storyboards for all sorts of UX-based use cases. There's a ton of examples in there for real products, including all his work at Yahoo. And her name escapes me right now. They used it at Google. Can't remember her name. Ask me afterwards. But she used it at Google, and she did the whole presentation at IE Summit about using it for the Google products. Anything that has to do with moving around, anything that has to do with a sense of place, is a fantastic use case for storyboarding. And that's the reason why I love using it for mobile, because mobile always starts with "where are you?" And that's what you're going to see in the pro tips in a second. So perfect segue into my next point, which is when storyboarding start by defining a place. Now, remember how we used to do designing, and we used to start with a persona. We used to go, who is this persona? Right? All about persona. First, we got to start with a persona. Right? When you start cooking dinner, make a roux. Anybody heard that talk by Jared Spool? Really great talk, right? Look it up. It's again from the IE Summit. He called it soup from a stone. But if you have a process that you follow in your UX design, persona is often part of that. Now, that age, I think, is passing, and we're entering the age of context. Now, by what I mean by this, now, when you're talking about a persona, persona used to include the context. So you say, oh, this is a middle-aged mother of two. She drives a minivan. She's a nurse. She goes to work. She goes to the market. She does this, right? So the work and the market and the fact that she was a nurse defined her context. And that's how we were taught to think about it, starting with a persona. Now, I'm going to postulate to you today that what has happened with our mobile phones and with the shift to this very high mobility is the place now defines the behavior. And the place is encapsulating the persona and driving the persona. And so when you're visioning your stuff, start with a sense of place. And then everything flows from there. If you have a creative block, just say, where are you? Where am I? Where am I picturing this being used? Am I in the car? Am I on BART? Am I walking around? Am I driving? And that is going to define a lot of the design that is going to flow out of that. That is the right place to start, without a doubt, for most of your mobile stuff, because you are moving around and this thing is in context. Does that make sense? So just take it on faith on this one. So this is an example of kind of where are you question, right? This is a cafe, of course, busy street, downtown. And what these are, if you'd recognize this, it's an opening shot of a movie. It's like an opening shot of a movie. If you see a view from the helicopter and there's loud banging music playing, then you're going to have a thriller, right? And if you have the accordion is playing and you have sort of subdued lighting, then you're going to have a chick flick, right? And by the way, you have my permission to call this the Where is Waldo principle. And there he is at the opening shot of the delicatessen. Okay, you guys have your homework. You got to watch delicatessen. Because Waldo. Yeah, never mind. All right, ask me later. Bottom line, this is a great place to start. And what's really nice is you can spend a little extra time on this. Really set the mood. Set the mood for the rest of your application. And the good news is that once you spend a little extra time on these stickies, you can reuse them. Just like that house was reused in another storyboard. When they pivoted, they still used the same house. It's still the same house. And she still feels bad, but now her dyer's on fire. So actually it has a reason to it. And there's actually a reason, something the napkin that can fix. Not just her mood, but actual dryer. So start with this. You can't go wrong. This is a great example of this. There's something different about the storyboard. Who can tell me what that is? This is a test if you've been paying attention to the whole persona question. No person! Yes! Thank you. Lawrence wins the prize. Exactly. There's no people in it. And it still works. This is a pretty unique storyboard with no person. You could kind of guess there's a person behind this. The shower, there's steam coming out. But the person itself is not there. And the use case still works extremely well. And that's really because whether it's almost independent of the kind of commuter you are, this is an app that's going to work for you, given this characteristics. So it's more about where you are than it is about who you are. But where is now encapsulating the who. You can see this person does not have kids, right? This person probably drives a sports sedan, right? There's probably some sort of work, definitely driving, right? This is definitely a driving app. Maybe it's a Mini. That looks like a Mini, right? That looks like San Francisco, right? You can see urban setting. Probably maybe Silicon Valley would still work. You can see a lot of stuff in the storyboard. It's really packaging it all up, and it all fits together in the nice, it makes a nice story. Okay, as promised, this is Kevin Chang and his stuff. And this is modeling Lou Rosenfeld, actually, and from Rosenfeld Media, who's selling books on UX. Anybody familiar with Rosenfeld? Yes, good. So this is a screenshot from, see what I mean, Kevin Chang's work. So this will be $60 for the books. Notice, sense of place, right? That's what we're talking about. Starting with where are you? Then using natural language. So these people are really talking to each other. Notice there's no caption here. You don't need a caption. Captions are just really bad, so don't use them. Use natural language. These characters are really talking to each other. So then you have a close-up of a square actually being used. Then he says, yeah, I'll just email you a receipt. Just sign it with your finger. And then this is the only caption that appears here. Is later. Right? Later, Lou is looking at how he did today. And talk about natural bang. This is the realism here. Notice his sales for the day were actually not as high as his other days. Still, he's smiling. Maybe overall he's doing well, but that is the little piece of realism that's included in there. Now, I always like to ask, who is the target user here? Merchant, that's right. It's very easy to make that error, and it's very, very important here. It is truly a merchant, right? It's for the merchant, even though it starts with a buyer, right? And a lot of it is the buyer. And there's another interesting part of this that I love. I love the way he does angles. It's just really great. So if you pick up a second book tonight, pick up Kevin's if you're really into this stuff. It's going to teach you all these things. But here's an interesting thing. This screenshot, you can see these people talking to each other, but this is almost a third person talking back. And that third person is the mobile phone. So if you think of the old Lost in Space series, you know, that crazy robot that would come out and say, "Danger, Will Robinson, danger," right? So this robot comes on the scene, and he does stuff. It's usually not particularly sophisticated. That's all he ever says, to my knowledge. At least that's what I remember. But at critical moment, that robot comes out. So you can treat your mobile phone almost like a person that comes on, or this like a dumb robot that comes on and says his or her piece. So it's almost like a different level of transition here. It's not an inanimate object, but it's truly a conversation back and forth. So there's a third piece in the conversation. They are talking, but then there's also this piece that is like a robot, Danger, Will Robinson, coming on to the conversation. It's less apparent here because of the way they're communicating and then using this as a conduit for communication. But in your application, think about that dynamic. That could be your dynamic there, is the phone is talking back to you. For example, if you're waiting for a repairman or you're waiting for Uber, right? Uber is talking back to you. It's not the driver's telling you how far they are, 5 minutes away, right? But it's really it's the Danger, Will Robinson. It's the robot that comes on that says, "He's 5 minutes away. Better get ready. Step outside in the cold and wait for the car." Does that make sense? Okay, so that's really the kind of the pro tips. Any other questions on this segment? Oh, we're good? All right. Wow, covered everything. Awesome. Very nice. So now we're moving on to the prototype. And we're going to talk about prototyping and appropriate fidelity, something we just touched on earlier, creating a minimum viable prototype, and embracing material design. How awesome this particular methodology is for material design. So cool. Okay. So, whoops, one back. So fidelity of the prototype must reflect the state of the completion of the project. I already mentioned that. This is the central axis on which this entire idea rotates. Is you're not in the deliverables business, but you're in the business of creating a product. The product is the product. Your deliverable is not the product. The pretty pictures are not the product. Even as a consultant, I struggle with people because they think, "Oh, well, where's the pretty pictures?" Well, we'll get to them when we're ready. There are no pretty pictures now because we're still in the concept stage. And that's because we're not there yet. Does that make sense? So this is really the central aspect of this, is you can say, well, what am I struggling with? What am I not sure about yet? If I'm still thinking about whether this is ready to build yet, I still should be at the storyboard stage. If I'm building the information architecture, should be in the sticky note stage. If I'm ready and now deciding colors and icon icon sizes, by all means, go to the Photoshop or Fireworks or OmniGraph or whatever you're into. But by and large, I think 80% of the time you're going to spend on the sticky note stage. And we'll talk about also the difference between documentation and design. The good news about this is your design and that's your prototype together. So you don't need another separate step to then create a prototype. You can immediately take this into testing. That flows out of this concept. So who knows what this is? Pirates of the Caribbean. Good guess. Stockholm, yes. She got Marina. Excellent. It's the Vasa ship. Yes, I was just at Stockholm, so I took this picture, and it's really impressive. This ship was just. This picture doesn't do it justice. It is impressive. It's 600 years old. Is it 600? 400 years old. Really impressive ship. But the reason why it's famous is not for how impressive it is, but because the story sounds like a typical IT project. So the King of Sweden commissions a giant warship to fight in the war with the Poles. The ship is lavishly decorated, and it's equipped with 72 big guns on 2 decks, which is unheard of amount of armament in this day and age. They're huge guns, right? And His Majesty insists that the ship be narrow and tall to make it faster, because that's what they did in those days. Even though the architect says, you might want to make it a little wider. He says, no, I really want it to be fast. This is going to be the fastest, most equipped, most impressive warship of the day. This is going to be the expression of my royal vision. And that's what they got. They got the vision big time. But the problem was, as soon as they launched it, about 40 minutes into it, 1 mile offshore, a gust of wind hits it, beautiful clear day, and it sinks. Right? And so it lays there for 400 years, and then they recover it, and now it's in a museum, and it's the number 1 attraction probably in Stockholm. And it is really impressive. But here's what was really impressive about this to me, is everyone knows about Vasa, but what people don't know about, there's a sister ship called the Apple. And the reason why nobody knows about it is they made that ship right after they made Vasa. They made 2 modifications on it. They made the upper deck guns smaller. They used 12-pounders instead of 24-pounders. And then they made the whole thing 1 meter wider. For those of you on a U.S. scale, that's 3 feet, and that's only 10% wider. So that's 10% wider and slightly lighter on top. And that ship sailed fine for 30 years. So that's the difference between sinking right out of the port and then sailing 30 years. Success and failure. So, the reason why I bring this up is because it's very important to prototype it. That's the reason to prototype it. And this is a little model. It sits in front of the big ship. It's a 1 to 10 scale replica. It's about that big. And you can see just how ridiculously tall and narrow this thing is. You can look at it and go, this is going to be so ridiculously unstable. You have no idea. And then if they had built that back in the day, it probably would have taken them, I don't know, a month maybe, if it was pretty enough. Then they would sail it in the bathtub, blow a little wind on it, and go, wait, this thing is just totally not working. This thing is going to sink. You can just see His Majesty, the King of Sweden, right, playing with the ship in the bathtub. Sorry if anybody from Sweden is listening in. But to me, that is exactly why we do this. We want to build a model, a minimum viable prototype of the big ship. We don't want to wait till we build the whole thing and then we sail it, and then the first gust of wind and this thing just sinks right out of the port. What a terrible waste. Which means you don't need to build it this way, much less develop it, God forbid, but you definitely don't need to do it at this fidelity if you're still struggling with the information architecture. And this is the actual progression of the screens that this team has taken. Notice how different these designs are. They even used a little ragged, ragged thing here. Look at this. It's beautiful. Look how different these designs are. Notice this is getting closer, right? But even this didn't work particularly well until they got to the latest or the most impressive disaster that is happening. And that was the design that they went forward with. And these are the iterations they've done in just 3 weeks. So in just 3 weeks, they went from a concept to a finished idea for all these iterations. Imagine doing this when you have it in high fidelity. You would never get it done in 3 weeks. Forget it. Forget about it. But you don't need to. Right? That's the good news. Instead, you focus on MVP, minimum viable prototype. And you institutionalize your failure by removing all risk. In other words, you fail quickly and easily and very fast for about $1. And we'll see how to do that in the testing. Okay, so here's a case study, in case you're wondering what this actually would look like for you and for a real app. How are we doing on time? We're doing good. Okay, so case study, TripAdvisor. Anybody here from TripAdvisor? Oh, I keep waiting for somebody to come in from TripAdvisor. And I've been doing this for so many years, and I've never met anybody yet. Maybe they don't have any designers. Well, anyway, if anybody knows anybody, just send them my way. I'd love to talk to them. So this is an early version of the TripAdvisor, and this is what it looked like. So TripAdvisor, you launch TripAdvisor as hotels, and my use case is I want a hotel, and I want a hotel near me. The problem with this interface was, well, great, find the best hotels, hotel name, find hotels near me now. Now this little checkbox is not checked when you launch this thing, and the number one use case is a hotel near me. That's the mobile use case, is I got stranded here, or I just landed and I need a hotel. Right, so if you miss this little non-standard little checkbox, then the hotels are going to be anywhere in the world, really. But here you are, find the hotels. Let's say I did find this checkbox, and I checked it, and I click this, and this is the result that I get. Now, look what happened here. I click hotels, I said find hotels, and here I am in stay. In fact, this whole thing sounds a little bit like a dog command. Stay, eat, see. Rover, stay. Right? And I already told it I want a hotel, but yet again, I have space being taken up by my navigation. All right, well, we can deal with this. And there's all this stuff here, and that's near me because I'm in Walnut Creek, and that's near me. Fantastic, great. But that's not the only way you can find hotels. That's not the only way TripAdvisor can advise you. There's another way. You can actually search for the word hotel. So there's a actual search button functionality. You can say, I want a hotel. Great. You search for the word hotel. Now what happens? Where are these hotels? Everywhere but near me. Interesting. And something else that's happened here. I know this is late in the day and it's probably not fair for you guys, but I still have to ask. Something else happened here. Text links, yes, that looks different, yes. It's something else, something missing. Something somewhat important when you're looking for a hotel. Price, yes. Price. That's exactly right. If you look carefully, this interface is very different from this interface. So somehow these guys have managed to build two search interfaces into the same app. Quite interesting, right? I wonder how that happened, right? See, by doing the storyboard and doing the sticky note thing, you probably could have avoided this. But wait, if I click search, filter search results, maybe I can find near me now. Well, yes, I can, but wait, these icons are suddenly different, and the hotel's icon is different. I'm sorry, I added locations, and things to do have suddenly changed from the binoculars to the running person. So there's issue. But this is not the only thing we can do. This is like the cat in the hat, right? It's not the only thing I can hold, said the cat in the hat. There's one more way that it can advise you. And that's if you go into this overflow menu and click Near Me Now. And that sounds, at first, the most promising. But actually, what happens is it catapults you into the Eat tab. So now I decided, yeah, I know you've been looking for hotels and stuff, but forget about it. You're hungry now because you've been really spending a lot of time looking at this. So, and of course, we're taking fully a third of your already tiny screen for navigation. It's all possible. It's just not. I I can't. I can neither confirm or deny. As like you said, I would love to actually ask them and find out, but no, just gotta get it done. Yeah, yeah. Maybe that's the case, but either way, not the greatest experience as you can imagine. So our minimum viable prototype, when we build this, is all about figuring out what's the right thing to build here. How do we tactically iterate? We have our vision. How do we then tactically iterate our design? And we start with just very simple toolkit. This is what I used to draw stuff in the book. And as I mentioned, there's no extra boxes around it. You don't need anything. If you do need the back button, you can draw this at the bottom, but really there's nothing else you need to do. And I'm going to demonstrate for you this parallel architecture design pattern, which is a much better design pattern for this type of search that we were doing on TripAdvisor. So all it takes is just 4 sticky notes to solve that entire use case with all these different ways, 3 different ways to find stuff. So you can solve this with just 4 sticky notes. And this is how I do it, literally. Just, you can see the screenshots here. Pretty much self-explanatory. If you don't have a ruler, you can just take another pack of sticky notes and use that as a ruler. Because I can't draw a straight line to save my life. So that's what I tend to do. And I'd start with a pencil, so you don't have to throw away quite as many wireframes. And then if you just messed up one thing, you can just erase it. Again, it's not about the pretty deliverable. It's not about expressing your inner artist. It's just get it done. This is all very lean and very effective. And if you can get it done faster and cheaper with just a pencil, then that's what you should be using. You're not going to win any contests. In fact, the more rough it is, the better. It should reflect where you are. If you're precision oriented and you already have decided all this, by all means use a pen. But if you're still deciding IA, use a pencil. You'll do this less. So this is my first screen. Notice we try to keep it as close as possible to the original, right? Notice this is a minimum viable prototype, which means I didn't need to draw these icons. I just drew a box. No big deal. One thing that I did add here is this filter strip called Browse Nearby. So you actually know that this is going to be searching nearby automatically. So I hit hotels. Also notice I reordered these. So the restaurants, I actually do think that the restaurants and things to do are the more likely of the 2 use cases. After all, you have to eat 3 or 4 times a day, well, maybe more, if you include coffee, and you're going to be doing more than one thing, but you only need to stay in one place at night. Again, your mileage may differ, but most of us end up staying at just one spot. All right, that joke didn't work. Okay, so then we're on to the search results here, and there you are again drawing a bunch of search results, and nearby has made it onto this page, and I drew just one example here. And notice I didn't bother drawing a whole bunch. The whole idea is minimum viable prototype. And is this minimum viable use case? Because you actually might get only a single result. Am I right? Maybe you're staying in some honky-tonk town and there's only one hotel, and that's your use case. So this is truly a minimum viable prototype. You don't need to draw a whole bunch if you're still deciding on how this whole thing should come together. So that's really the concept. I hope you're getting this idea. Lean, fast, loose, talk to the customer immediately. So that's what I meant. Only the necessary detail. Let the customer imagine the rest. So then you have the search screen. These are my previous searches. This is my QWERTY keyboard. Again, the keyboard is a separate sticky, so I can reuse it. I only need to draw one. I don't need to draw every single time I do this, I can reuse it in 10 different projects. People pretend to type. Here's something typed in here, Hilton San Jose. That's my other search use case. And here I am. When I actually do a search, I am sorted by best match, as my filter strip describes it. And this is why it's called a parallel architecture, is because this is an accelerator mode. I jump directly into search results. But here I can search and jump into the same exact search results, no longer have two different search results, but jump into the same exact search results, but now using a keyword of some kind. So these are the 4 sticky notes, parallel architecture. I think a much more effective approach to designing this particular use case. Okay, good. Pictures. So what about material design, you can say? Well, what about it? I actually think it's really awesome. This is really the next thing, and I think Google is taking the lead away from Apple with material design because it is more effective. And I have it on good authority that Google themselves have used the very same methodology that you guys are watching today, which is a bunch of paper and a wooden disc. This is actually a wooden disc for a fab button to design this design language. So material design has roots in the same physical paper that you guys are hearing about today. So the best tool for modeling this stuff is actually paper. Because you're talking about digital paper, it should behave in the same way that the real paper does. They say don't give your customers paper cuts, right? Don't suddenly flip this angle sideways or something so that it doesn't cut you. So here's a second case study of the same TripAdvisor. Now let's take 2 with material design. I'm going to put them side by side. And what we're going to be using for this is slightly different a design pattern. This is a 2D more like this pattern, where you have basically a full sheet and a keyhole type of browsing experience, where you can go up and down and then side to side on each row. And if you ever use Netflix, any Netflix users? Yeah, you've seen this pattern, right? GoWalla also uses something similar. But it's highly underused. So if you have visual content, do consider that for your own app, just as an aside for today. And that's, by the way, what we do in the workshop. When we do a workshop, we have a bunch of these patterns, and we explore that using sticky notes, and then we practice testing this stuff. So you guys actually get to walk away with new wireframes for your project. Okay, so on to the meat of this. This is the wireframe from before. Notice a bunch of links. We call this a list of links pattern. Not particularly exciting. You have to click something, but you don't really know if this is the right thing. Well, you do, but at the same time, you don't know what's under it. Now, here's a different design pattern. This is that 2D more like this pattern. Now you actually know what's around you already. So you have kind of a best bets structure. It's also much more in keeping with material design tenet of being visual and being directly available and anticipating what people are going to be doing. So it's already answering the question of nearby. So you don't need the whole browse nearby stuff. So the whole thing is decluttered. You removed a step. Does that make sense? And again, notice minimum viable prototype. You don't need to have all this, stuff here. You don't need the Napa Farms Market. They can imagine that. They got the yogurt right there. Does that make sense? Don't need to draw the whole thing. You don't know if it's the right pattern until you test it. So don't bother. Spend 10 minutes instead of spending 10 hours. Don't need to spend 10 hours on this. And notice it's all in pencil. So I can erase it. If something I don't like, I can erase it. Notice also I'm using these overlays, which is, again, the physicality aspect of this. Different color stickies. Very easy to cut and paste these things. And you can use them as different overlays. Again, material design allows you to have these panels. The whole thing is pretty much hidden. It's all about content first. So in this case, our filter layer is showing up as a strip down the right. Now, is this the right pattern? I don't know. You should test it. Now, TripAdvisor didn't pay me any money, so I haven't tested this. But as an example, it works extremely well, I think, because it's a very handsome way to provide a filtering layer without really having an explicit button up there. That way, that whole maddening iOS thing where you search and you can't quite hit the, when you enter in the browser URL, for example, and you can't quite hit the right thing because they're just have to put the function to the right of that, it's gone, right? You don't need to worry about that. That filter and that icon, that disappeared. So you can use this on a canvas night, or you can even use this on your watch if you wanted to, on Android Wear, because the entire thing is your search bar. Does that make sense? Right? So there you have some examples, and here I provided 2 of them. Perfect. So you can see that example here. This is a search screen. Again, very similar to our old search screen, but there's one thing that's added here, which is the overlay. When they start typing, they get an overlay of auto-completion. So it's an autocomplete type of use case. I started typing H. These are popular things from around me, or popular queries that other people have typed in this location, etc. You also have a category type of choice that's bold. So very much material design approach. This is a lot of stuff that was missing in Android 4. It is now codified and implementable straight out of the box in Android 5. So you can see the progression and how well this works for material design. So this is, again, all 4 together. You can see the progression from Android 4 to Android 5 material design. To contrast this with iOS 8, this is a very interesting example, and this is exactly what we see when we're doing the testing for this. People ask, wait, is this a button or is this an entry field? It's the same exact problem we see when we actually implement the interface. Same exact issue. Because when they removed a lot of the interface components and maybe make everything flat, they've experienced a lot of the same usability issues. People don't know if something is actually a field, and they don't know if something is actually a button. Everything disappears. And notice there's a lot of graphics here, so it's very heavy in the graphics. Is this a link? I don't know. Right? You don't have to wait till you're at this stage. You can get a lot of that information at this stage. And you can see how well this works here as well. Because the way it works is it highlights the same issues you're going to see in your interface. You're going to see the same exact issues here in the sticky note layer. Any questions about this area? Yeah. Boy.
There's one aspect that you're speaking about where you're kind of getting the story and you're kind of getting the UI and the architecture set up. And then as soon as you apply a particular design strategy, whether it's material design or iOS, then I feel like you're getting into more specifics. And so when do you decide, like, when you figure out where you want to go, and then you come back and you say, okay, now we want to do this for Android and we want to do it for Apple, is that now when you change your sort of sticky notes to be more representative of those UIs? Because material design, and I do agree, it was probably one of the best guidelines I've ever seen put out by anybody so far. It's just beautiful.
Yay.
And people should really read it because it's really well done. It almost takes now that you're taking a particular design strategy, and I'm trying to figure out how does that impact your initial sort of keep it kind of general and open so that I can really figure out where I go. And now when I come down to where I want to be, now I'm going to apply these design strategies.
Absolutely. And when we do it in the workshop, it's fairly clear. But you spend as much time as you need on the storyboard defining the what. And once you have that use case in place, it's actually a fairly quick progression to the drawing. I don't have these slides with me today, but I show an example of my very first project that we did with this. And the example there, it's almost a one-to-one type of transition where you say, okay, what should be on the screen? Let's draw the buttons. Don't worry about the alignment at this point. Let's just put the buttons on here. Just like that opening slide, remember, with the 2 buttons on there? So take a picture or use the, get it from the gallery. Right. The normal pattern for this is a little bit more involved, where you actually have the gallery open and then you have the 2 buttons. But you don't need to get to that level yet. You just know that they have to pick one or the other, and you can represent that as a separate screen. So you can use the patterns or you can be fairly general. The trick is to get there to where you have something tangible to put in front of them. Even if it's not like the latest, greatest pattern or the greatest description of a pattern. Does that make sense? As long as you have something to put in front of them, you can start getting feedback from the customer about what you're trying to do. And then what you want to do is take the patterns that are out there and make these as realistic as possible. The good news about these is you can see if you keep these in pencil. Now, people have tried this with Sharpies. It's just too thick, right? So you have to use a mechanical pencil or one of these fine pens. But just any old thing would work. Mechanical pencil is great because see, that would actually, you can see how much of it fits on the screen. Almost exactly the same size as the actual interface. And that's really where you want to be. You want to see if the word like a Gewürztraminer is going to run off the screen. We got wine right there. I think we have some. So, sorry about that. Those guys, they're dialing in. They have some scrumptious food here for everybody who did come in. But my point here is that you can see if something's going to run off the screen. You can see if you have space enough to put this functionality in here. And that's the critical part of this design, is because you're going to know if something fits or not. And you're going to know what you can turn it sideways. Yes, in this format, what fits in this format. Or I can use a larger sticky note to see if a 7-inch tablet is going to fit across as well, and try different orientations of that. So you can use this all the way up to, I'd say a 7-inch tablet works really well. I think if you go to the iPad style, that's starting to get a little bit more tricky, starting to get more into kind of the normal issues that we see in the wireframe, but you still can do that. I've seen that being used very effectively. But it is starting to look a little bit more work. You're starting to put more work into the prototype than into the actual testing. And part of the issue is the iPad doesn't move that much. It's more like the alpha device. People don't tend to take it with them. They just use it in the office or the home and doesn't move much. So it's more like a laptop. So the same stuff applies. This stuff, however, it moves. You can move it. You see the ergonomics on this, right? You can see that in order to tap something on the top, I actually have to change hands and tap something on the upper bar. You can observe all this when you're testing this. So I hope that answers the question a little bit.
Oh, I'm sorry. I guess my other question is this. The mobile devices are moving towards a bigger size than what you're currently using. And with iPhone 6 Plus and the Samsung Galaxies and et cetera.
Sure.
So now there's this more sort of in between, sort of like a Fire Amazon and then these small phones. So do you use a different size pad for that, or you still start smaller?
Absolutely. They have a variety of these. In fact, one other approach of this is wearables. And this works extremely well for wearables because they have this exact size. So you can model this extremely well. I have the Apple Watch. You can model the interface using these tiny sticky notes. And by the way, all the communication between the two is best described by a storyboard, right? Because you have to get a notification on your watch, maybe attend to it on your phone. So you can design the whole thing concurrently. It works really well for that. So yes, they do have a variety of different pad sizes that are just out of the box that would work for this. You can also design most interfaces. If you look at the, unless you're really dealing with some edge use case, what happens with a lot of these bigger devices is they just show you more content, but they don't necessarily show you more buttons across the top. There may be some issues like this function went into the overflow or it did not go into the overflow, but that was more of an Android 4 issue, not so much an Android 5 issue. So if you're looking at the Android 5 and the iPhone 6s, both of them have exact same functionality on the screen. So yeah, ergonomically it's going to be a little bit interesting and different, but from the standpoint of the design, you can still use the same sticky note because the functionality is identical. But you may be able to fit the word Gewürztraminer across the whole thing now. Does that make sense? Okay, that's a great question. And we got one more section to cover, which is test. But I'm going to need just a little bit of water. So hold it 1 second. Forgot to grab it. There we go. All right. So when we talk about testing, 3 points to keep in mind is to test with decaffeinated people, to treat everyone as an experienced partner, and to ask million-dollar questions. And we're going to see exactly what that means. So as I mentioned before, your minimum viable prototype is both the design and the prototype. So you don't need to do both. It works really well because you can jump directly into testing. In fact, what I recommend is once you have your storyboard done, and that you have to have done, and they have to have it approved, and you have to show it to some customers and to all your stakeholders. Once that's approved, as soon as you have just three sticky screens done, go ahead and jump into testing. Go out there and let it rip and find out. Because a lot of the assumptions you have are going to be challenged by that. I guarantee you. You are not going to come out of that being the same person. You're going to be humbled. Especially recommended if you have a big ego, if you think you're a great designer. Fantastic. This is what you need. You need to go out there to the coffee shop while people are waiting for their morning coffee. Everyone's a bona fide New Yorker. Bona fide New Yorker. Because when they're waiting in line and they haven't had their caffeine, they are going to tell you exactly what they think about your app. And exactly how much it doesn't work, or what stuff works or what stuff doesn't. And you can easily get fantastic feedback from about 20 people by the time the lunch hits. All for about the price of coffee. Because I give everyone basically a coffee coupon. So when they test it, I'll say, I'll buy your coffee today. Can you help me with my app? It works extremely well. Now, some people are going to say no. Some people are going to get cranky. That's okay. Just keep moving down the line and go, I'm sorry, can you help me with my app? And when they see this hand-drawn prototype, it's actually really cool because they're going to be interested in what that is, because obviously you put in some work into this. And they're going to give you excellent feedback right then and there. Now, it helps if the person's already kind of browsing on the phone and looking bored and going, oh, how much longer? Okay, I'm going to check my Twitter one more time. Right? They're already bored, so you can spot them in line, and you can go, hey, I'll buy your coffee today. Would you mind testing this? And just kind of, pretty please. Works extremely well. Okay, on to my next point, which is by the time lunch comes around, for about $20, you could test 10, 15 people to where you have your prototype pretty much worked out for your website, or in this case, this is a responsive website from Kershaw, and this is what it looks like. So by the time lunch rolls around, you already have something you can give to your developers. Notice we have 30 seconds for this. There's one difference here that a lot of people ask me about. This is the drawer, and this is what it looks like in the design. Notice the slight difference there. Who can point that out? Yeah, so in one case, the drawer moves the content over, and in the other case, the drawer overlays the content. You get that? This is critical for prototyping because this takes about 5 minutes, and this takes about 20 minutes. Which one do you want to do? You've been paying attention to what I've been trying to teach. You probably want to spend 5 minutes because you don't ever know if the drawer is the right approach, right? You don't want to spend time and don't want to wait, don't want to, waste the time. And a lot of people ask me, which one is better, right? Is it better if it moves it over, or is it better that it overlays it? I can tell you right now, in all the testing that I've done, there's absolutely no difference. There's no difference. So go with the one that's easier to model. And the one that's easier to model is the one that's overlaying. And you can model the transitions, as you'll see in a minute. So you can actually do this and say, this thing, when you tap over there, this thing moves in right here. And it's critical you don't use the language. You're going to say drawer. You can say element. Or you can say this thingamabob. It moves in here, right? So you don't lead the person. You just kind of say, this thing moves over here when you tap there. that make sense? And that takes literally 5 minutes to do because that screen is exactly like this screen, but it has a little overlay on top. I'm not exaggerating about the 5 minutes. And this is how you, this is again the same kind of thing, but now it's got a drop down. Whoops. There it goes. So there's the drop down. So you can easily test this very high-tech, very, very high-tech website, very sophisticated website, mobile responsive, a lot of really cool patterns here, a lot of assumptions they're making that people actually understand what these things mean, that they know these things are separated somehow. There's literally no lines here at all. This is a very slick, sophisticated website. Have they tested this? I don't know. I don't know. But my point here is that you can, for about $20, with 10 or 15 people, all before lunch, and you will have your answer. So it works extremely well for responsive as well. Any questions about this part? Okay, let me show you what the next point here. So treat participants like experienced partners. What do I mean by this? Is if your prototype is very unfinished, that means it represents exactly where you are in the process, they're going to be that much more likely to give you feedback. If you present them with something slick and finished, they're going to say, well, I don't particularly like the shade of purple. I wasn't going to say gray. Okay, come on, that was funny. All right. Okay. Caffeine is right there. Yes, go ahead.
When you test, do you need to give the storyboard to the person you're testing with so that he has context?
Great question. You actually don't. You can tell them, you can say, you're in a coffee shop and you're looking for a great hotel for your next vacation. So that's why I always say, test it where people actually do the task that you're doing. And I tend to prefer things like doctor's offices or coffee shops where people are impatient, they're in pain, because then the feedback is very raw and very kind of practical, right? They're not going to, you know, I want to test with New Yorkers. I don't want to get, yeah, it's just okay. Was this all right? Yeah, it's just all right. Yeah, I want to know, this sucks right here. If this was great. I want this today, right? But this part, it didn't work for me at all. I would do it this way, right? And when it's a rough prototype, they're much more likely to have that kind of conversation. And guess what? Because it's rough, you can draw the new one. You can go, okay, well, let me grab a sticky note and draw it. Is this what you mean? Is this what you were talking about right here? Yes, that's what I want, but I want that icon to look like that. That's the kind of interaction you're looking for. You don't have to take their suggestion. As a designer, it's up to you to filter that stuff out and to compare that with your vision and compare it against the business objectives. But to have that type of exchange, this is the conduit for that type of connection with another human being. And it's the best conduit is the one that's really rough. So that's really what you're talking about. So how do you actually test it? You hand this over to them and you say, go ahead, and you thrust that toward them and they pick it up. And as soon as you pick it up, you say, imagine you are X doing Y. Go ahead. And just sit back and relax. Just sit, I call it sipping iced tea on a sunny porch. Just sit back and close your mouth and let them tell you what's going on. And if they say something like, well, I don't know what to do, I don't know what this is, you say, what would you do if I wasn't here? Or what do you think, right? That's kind of the standard response. So if you tap hotels, then you tap search, you get the next page. Now, there's two ways to do this. Okay, this is what people get confused about sometimes too. So I'm giving all my secrets away, like the one direction. So, okay, that was funny. All right. So there's two ways to do it. One, you stack a bunch of sticky notes, your entire flow, onto a pack, and then you hand it to them, right? So all the sticky notes are there. That way you peel off to expose the next one. Does that make sense? So that's one way. The other way is you hand it to them with just the first page, and you have a bunch of pages in your hand, and as soon as they tap something, you pick the right page out of the stack and put it on top. Guess which one I prefer? The second one, right? Because you can branch your prototype immediately. When they tap something, you pick the right one. When they tap something you don't have yet, you go, what would you expect to happen? And then the next person, you already have the prototype for. you have some ideas to do. That's what I mean by getting out there with just 3 stickies and then building it up as you go. Because you're going to get a lot of ideas. You're going to get fantastic, high fidelity, live feedback with your empathy engaged with direct connection with your customer. It is absolutely solid gold. Solid gold. I have lots of videos. If you guys go online and watch my videos, people actually say that's $1 million feedback right there. I would never have thought of that. And immediately they got it just by working for 30 minutes. So notice this one is, if you look carefully, this is sitting on top. The other reason to do this, to do it this way, do it the second way, where you start with just a single screen and then all the other sticky notes are coming in after, is that you can model transitions. You can, I'll show you that in a second. So those are the 2 reasons to do it. You can branch it, you can model transitions. Okay? But here's what it looks like. So I stop here, I tapped, the next one came in. This is my next screen. You can see the previous screen is kind of showing through a little bit through it, and then I tap this. I can peel it back to then go back. And you know, on Android, back is a little bit tricky, so it's up to you to figure out how far back you want to jump. Right? Did they hit the back button on the bottom, or did they hit the back button on the top? That's what people struggle with, right? That architecture. These are the kind of questions you answer with this. Is this what you expected? Oh, it wasn't. Which screen did you expect? Let's flip through our stack and figure it out, right? So then you're back to the home screen. So mobile transitions also, like I mentioned, can be easily tested using simple sticky note prototypes. And all you're doing is you're just going, this piece comes in like this from the top. Or when you tap here, this piece comes in like that from the left. It's very, very easy to do that. In fact, I was talking to somebody from Google, not at liberty to reveal the name, but she was saying how this person was a developer, and they would spend 3 months building something, and then they would go and test it, and they would discover all these problems with it. And then they spend literally an hour with the sticky notes and at the workshop, because they use exact same methodology, guess what, for their workshops and for their Google Ventures. Right? They use exact same thing. They use all the sticky notes and the pieces. So they have designed a new transition for their stuff. And it was this accordion stuff. So they actually bent this thing like an accordion, and they said, oh, wouldn't it be cool if it was like this? And they get fantastic feedback, and that's what they're going to be coding. So that's another reason is you kind of have your imagination take flight, because the how can now be different because you got the what. Now the how, you can experiment. You can go, is this the transition you want? What if this thing comes in flying this way? Okay, well, what if it was flipped like that, flipping to make the new content, to expose new content? Is that better, right? You can kind of say, you can model different things very, very quickly and easily using these sticky notes, different transitions. And transitions are a very important part of the mobile experience. So then finally, I know we're a little bit over, but you guys were asking good questions, right? So it's all in good fun. So finally, ask $1 million questions. My favorite one at the end to ask is, how much would you pay for this app? Now you've had this experience, you can ask them this. Why is this an important question? Because when the money comes into the picture, people's demeanor changes, right? If they say, oh, I love this app, this is great, blah, blah, blah. How much would you pay for it? Well, actually, I would prefer it to be free, right? Then you know. And you can ask a deeper question. How would you expect us to make money? What should we monetize? We got some fantastic feedback from different people about that. They start brainstorming. Start going, well, actually, I wouldn't monetize this. I would pivot it a little bit and do this instead, and then I would pay for that. What a great stuff to get back from the actual customers, right? So, in conclusion, start with your design workshop. Develop a vision. Make sure this vision is approved by your stakeholders and show it to your potential customers. Make sure they're just as excited about the vision as you are. Then stick with sticky notes, literally, for about 80% of your development time. Because your design and the prototype is one, and you can take it directly into the testing. So all the iterations should be done in the sticky notes. And only when you're finally ready and you feel like you got the design developed, then go and do this part. Then skin it. And so know the difference between design and documentation. And make sure you do the right activity for the right reason. Don't do this because somebody's going to be impressed by it. Do it when it's actually required. Because really, the product is the product, not the deliverables. So what's the best way to design mobile interfaces? That's the question we started with. That's what we're going to end with. Best way you design is by focusing on the product and getting out of the business of deliverables. So go with Lean in 2015. Thank you.
Any more questions? Oh,
Excellent.
Yeah. So this looks really good when you are building something from scratch. But let's say that you have a very sophisticated application already. It's built out, and you're just looking at the design of, let's say, adding a single screen or two screens. Of course, the temptation is to just, let's say, print out all the screens and only sketch the ones you're working on. But it seems like, for the reasons that you mentioned, it would put somebody in a different mindset if they're looking at, let's say, polished screens mixed in with sketches.
It didn't seem to matter as much. It's more like it's going to point them to the ones that it's going to kind of give away the give away the game, if you will. It's going to flip the card if you play, blackjack. It's going to show the cards too early, right? They're going to know exactly where you're going to be asking the question. But at the same time, it's okay. If it's a professional application, chances are these people are engaged. They're an engaged audience. If you're talking about like something SAP or some billing or something, they already know it backwards and forwards. They're going to be very engaged in the outcome. So a co-designing type of thing where you show them some rough sketches and say, well, this is the sequence and these are the few rough things, just actually be honest and upfront about it. That works really well. The other thing I would say is if you have something running, that's even better. You can start with the running application, have them go through the flow, and then say, well, now what we were thinking is to design it this way. I'll try it using sticky notes. And then see what they, give us. Can you give us feedback? Was this an improvement? How was that? Was this work? Now, see, that's a leading question. Was this an improvement? Right. How was your experience using the new version? Which one would you prefer and why? For what reason? Right. So that's a great example. So you can also A/B test this, do a kind of a micro A/B test. So some people you can start with the new application. Some people you can start with the existing application. That way you remove the recency bias. Recency bias is basically the first thing you see is the one you fall in love with. So the very first thing they see in the A/B test when you compare the two, that's going to be their favorite. So by starting with a different prototype each time, you're going to remove the recency bias. And the good news about this is almost so easy to do because each test is 5-10 minutes. You can almost do a qualitative test on this. You can test 25 people in 3-4 days if you're so inclined. It's really good for nitty-gritty stuff, but if you're looking for which one did they prefer? Let me give this to my marketing manager. That's what they want. They want numbers. Well, you can actually test 30 people if you wanted to. And it wouldn't take you 3 months to recruit them. You can actually get this done in a week. Test 30 people in a week if that's what you want. I don't encourage you to do that because you don't need it. You don't need to. 10 people is plenty. Going to give you more than enough stuff. And you want to iterate, right? That's what really the best thing. But you can make it quantitative if that's what you wanted to do. You could. Does that make sense? Okay, perfect. Great. A satisfied customer. All right. Thank you. Question in the back.
Hi. I think I might have answered this in my own mind, but it has to do with fundraising. And do you have any thoughts on where this process, how it sits alongside fundraising? I was fortunate to be able to go through the whole design process using stickies and to map out my mobile app. But then I got into conversations with people that said, you need an MVP. And that what my assumption was It needed to be a beta, a working thing. And so it sort of went that way. And now you're saying, yo, look, this is good enough. But is it good enough for whom? That's the question.
That's a great question. Yeah, I think your audience always, no matter where we are, we have to consider the audience. It should work great for your team. It should work great for your remote team. You should have expectations set with your developers. But if somebody has never seen this before, for you to raise $10 million using sticky notes, I have not heard of that happen. So let's be honest here. Unless you're amazing, your drawings are amazing, and stickies are made out of gold, and that's what you're selling, maybe. But I would say test it on your own to prove it to yourself what works. Polish it up. That's really going to work well for you, and then put it in a nice application like any of the prototyping stuff, and use a nice quality design to make it look finished, and then you can hand to them something with hotspots so they can play with it and actually try it out. But then you can say, look, we've done all these iterations already. You can see all these wireframes that we've done, just like that Be a Hero app, and you can say, we started with this, and we ended up here. Especially it works really well when a VC or somebody says, have you considered blah, 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 or in my fantastic experience, because I am really, really smart, have you considered that? You can say, yes, I have, actually. Look, not only that, but we've tried these other 5 designs, and none of them work better than what we're actually presenting to you. See, they'll be impressed with that, because you did your homework. And it'll only set you back about $20. That's a good ROI, right?
So how important is the designer in this process? I think you've talked about there's
That's
the
a trick
business, there's the designer, there's the users, there's the technical team. And then the side question to that is, how important is a great designer versus a designer?
Well, you should always hire the best design consultants, and there's nobody better than us. Well, I'd say it helps. It doesn't hurt, right? Because you're gonna, if you have a good designer who's done a lot of mobile, they know where to start. There's infinite number of ways to design something, or almost infinite. For you to narrow it down, it helps to have some good starting process. But personally, I believe it's much more effective to start with what you know and then go forward. But the testing part is always really critical. No matter whether you hired a designer or didn't hire a designer or you're doing it yourself, testing is really the critical part. That's the magic sauce. Designer is going to save you a lot of time, but technically, do you really need somebody? Well, maybe. Depends really on what you're doing. If you look at something like Google, for example, that whole beautiful stuff is very serendipitous. That homepage, I don't know if you guys heard that whole thing. The Sergey was not an HTML person. He didn't like HTML. So he said, what is the easiest thing that we can do to give people access to our beautiful search engine technology? Because that's what he was really into. So he just put a text box in there. That's all he knew how to do. That's all he ever wanted to do. So that's how, the world's most iconic UI came about. He was not a designer. He never wanted to be a designer. But nowadays, I think it's kind of important to go that last mile too, to add a little bit of a different feel to it. There's a great quote actually from Luke Obluski this morning, who tweeted, the DNA for something along the lines, I'm paraphrasing, the DNA for humans, bonobos, and chimps is 99% the same. Design matters. Right, so that's hopefully that provides the answer.
Thank you very much. I really enjoy your method of using a simple
thank you so much.
sticky note. I got a situation I like to get the input. Basically, I like to design a mobile applet for electric car charging station.
Mm-hmm.
We drive electric car, and I'm one of them. And sometimes we go and charge the car. And many EV driver just sitting there for half an hour, do nothing. So I like to pick the brain and ask them for feedback, which is a perfect situation. They sit there and do more, right? So I'm thinking if you approaching
perfect.
them and give them sticky note, it seems a little bit, very, very basic and very amateur. It seems like I don't know what I'm doing. But I show them a stack of sticky notes, even though it's good for all the applications. But this application, I like to present them with a more professional, such as give them a situation like exactly what you have, but on a tablet, iPad, and show them, here, I got a situation, can you spend 5 minutes, go over that, give me feedback?
Sure.
Would you mind? So I would mind to hang them a iPad, sit in the car and play with it, and after that, they let me know how they like it or anything like that. So this is something I thought about, but get your input. Is it a good way to approaching them situation like that? Because you need to have people more professional. The first impression, they want to find out if you know what you're doing. If you approaching something so simple, they're afraid that you are so amateur. So I like to give them a good impression that we spend a lot of work and we do a little more professional. And can you tell me your input? So what do you think?
I think the attitude with which you approach the task is going to determine the outcome in many ways. If you feel that it's not good enough, then it's not going to be good enough, I'd say. But you have to start somewhere. So before you approach these guys that you feel intimidated by, I'd say approach friends and family. And then it's much easier to get get the wheels rolling. And then you'll see their reaction, and then kind of build up from there. I think people, well, I don't want to overgeneralize, but people that have electric cars are usually fairly affluent, so they're used to being sold. If you're coming in like you're selling something, it's going to backfire. If you're handing them the iPad, they've seen the iPad before, believe me. So they're going to be like, what the heck is that? If it's a hand-drawn, it's well done, looks like you spent some time on it, it's a hand-drawn prototype, they probably have never seen that before. So they're more, I mean, if you dress like a bum too, if you're not, not appropriate appearance, but looking at you right now, I think you'll be fine. There's not going to be a problem, right? If you feel like wearing a tie and a jacket too, then that may be something you can try. But I definitely would try something a little more approachable, like friends and family, and then get it down to where you feel comfortable enough to draw it really well. Use a ruler, right, so it looks professional. Sticky notes can still look professional. In fact, sketches are really, really special because they're one of a kind, and people that are affluent realize that this is one of a kind stuff you're showing them, right? So it's they're less likely to give you good feedback about something that's totally polished because they want to be paid for their time. If you take my meaning, so it's almost like the opposite effect. Plus, you don't have to start with them. You can probably start with somebody in a coffee shop, and most places in San Francisco they'll take you up on your free coffee. Right? Go to a student shops. Perfect. San Francisco State. There's a great coffee shop there. Called Cafe 101. Just students will take you up on a free cup of coffee. You don't have to wait. You can say, pretend you have an electric car and you're charging it. Here you go. Yeah. So a little less intimidating. And then once you get ready to, once you have it all beautifully done and you've tested with everyone that you can, and you got it comfortable, then you have a beautiful visual. Put it actually on the actual device that they will be using. Don't put it on the iPad when it's an iPhone application. Put it on the iPhone and then give them the iPhone. And then, but you may have to pay them at that point like $200 or something, more than a cup of coffee to test, because that's a real test. Yeah. Buy them a hood ornament for a Tesla. Just couldn't resist. All right. Any other questions? Great.
How can this approach be adapted for applications for augmented reality? So
Oh wow, that's a $50,000 question. Yeah, can this be adopted for augmented reality applications? I'm not at liberty to say, but we are working with a company on an augmented reality app for them, and it's kind of like a Google Glass, but industrial version of it. So I'll let you know. I haven't tried it yet. But we do know it works really well for wearables, whether you can create a contraption where you put something in front of their eyes and kind of do this type of, stickies, put the stickies in their eye, and it might be a little tricky, so we'll see. So far, where we've got it is we're using a simple prototype like this because these things are really simple cards, and then they have a model, and so they're doing sort of they're looking at the stickies, but they're using the device to guide the prototype. So it's a little bit like Wizard of Oz technique. You guys are familiar with this? So yeah, pay no attention to the man behind the mirror. That's what we say, right? What you're seeing is the interface. So you're doing this, but the interface, then you are the interface. You play the role of the machine. You watch what they do, and then you do with the interface what would happen normally when they would do some gesture on another device. Whereas the difference here is this is a direct contact. They tap this here on the sticky, versus with the wearable, they actually interact with the wearable, but you change the UI in a different spot. Does that make sense? That's the difference? Yeah, so we'll see how that works. We do know wearables, however, work really well because that you can literally mount this on somebody's wrist and see how that works. So yeah, great question. Yeah, you really want to push this already. I love this. This is great. All right.
Okay, Greg, thank you very much for your inspiring and educational talk. I'm afraid we've really run out of time at this point.
We'll connect after.
Thank you everyone for coming out. And by the way, if you haven't received a free copy from us, you can purchase Greg's copy and get it signed by the author. The first 10 people who registered for a regular ticket receive free copies. But if you're not one of them, then you have another chance. And thank you once again. Bye-bye.
Thank you all very much for coming. Appreciate it. Thank you. All right. All right. Thank you so much.
We have found a mobile phone, so if you if you don't see your phone with you, please come speak with me.
Oh, by the way, everybody, I am planning an online class on this. This is going to be the first time this is actually offered, kind of in this online course. And then the other one is we may be doing a workshop as well in the area. So if you're interested in actually trying this out for your app, come see me, give me your card, or just write your email on a sticky note. I have some right here, some sticky notes for you so that I can write back to you and let you know when that's available. All right. Thank you again.